Well, we're going to be back in Jonah today. We're going to cover a little more ground. So let me take you to Jonah chapter 1, and I'm going to start reading from the very beginning, and I'm going to read through verse 12. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port, and after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. And then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." And then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who's responsible for this calamity." They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who's responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What's your country? What people are you?" And he answered, "I'm a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord, because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, and so they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know this is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Jonah. I cannot believe you guys pay me to do this. I've been having so much fun studying this. So we're going to go back to the story of Jonah today, a familiar story that most of us have come to know as Jonah and the whale, which is a little bit unfortunate because there's so much more going on here than the whale. The whale actually is a side thing. Like, yes, it shows up for a chapter, and it is a wild detail, right, that he gets swallowed by a fish, and can he survive, and all of that. But if you get stuck on that, you miss so much of what the story of Jonah has to offer us. So what we're trying to do is break away from the flannel board, break away from the VeggieTales version, break away from the children's version of Jonah's story. And it's not that the children's version is bad. Like, what we do with children's versions is we kind of try to simplify it and strip it down and get it down to a main point, which is great for children. The problem, I think, is that as adults, all we know is the children's version of this story. And so last week, we set out to rectify that. We're going to fix that for you. And I hope when we're done in these next couple weeks, you're going to be like, "Great story, and I will never see that the same again," because there's so much here for us. So last week we set the stage kind of to see the story from a different perspective. So that's why we only covered 3 verses, because we were kind of given the big picture, big overview of the whole story. And maybe if you were with us last week, maybe for the first time, you're like, "Wow, that is a witty, complex story full of nuance and humor. That's not the children's version I remember." And there's so many interesting details that we can miss. Some of them are in the Hebrew and the way it plays out, and so we've tried to highlight a couple of those, and we'll continue to do that. This book, though, Jonah's story, it sits among the Old Testament group of books we call the minor prophets. Minor only because they're smaller books. And so they're the minor prophets, and we established, like, this one is different than all the rest. So all of those minor prophets, when you read them, it's like the word of the Lord came to Micah, and then the rest of the book is kind of like, here's what God says to his people, and it's the prophet telling them. That is not how the story of Jonah works. The story of Jonah is the word of the Lord came to Jonah, but we don't hear anything that he has to say. Jonah is the message. Right? So it's not Jonah's going to bring the message. It's like, okay, so pay attention because Jonah is what I'm trying to say to you. And so that's kind of what we're unpacking as we go through this. And as we said last week, nothing else in your Bible is going to read quite like Jonah. One of the genres that it would kind of fit in a modern way is satire. Like it's this book that kind of makes fun of and gives us this picture of Jonah that is large and wild. And so like he's this disappointing wreck of a prophet. And so the opening verse presents us with, here's Jonah, he's the prophet of God, here's what God has asked him to do, and then 3 verses in, things go in a really unexpected direction, not how you thought the story should go, knowing who he is. So there's an immediate irony and twist to the story, just a couple of verses in, and so the story unfolds, right? And Jonah is the only one in this whole story who refuses to listen to God. Like everyone and everything listens to God and is responsive to God in the story. So the pagan sailors, the Ninevites, the wind, the fish, the sun, a plant, a worm, like they all listen to God except for one glaring exception. Jonah, God's prophet. And so we're supposed to notice this contrast like, everybody is listening to God except the prophet. That's a twist, right? And Jonah, like right away, we find out he is not the person you would expect him to be. Like you have these caricatures of what people should be. Like here's what the pagans are like, and here's what the prophets and the godly people are. And what you find out in Jonah is right away it all twists and goes a different way. And the prophet is not who you thought he would be. And the pagans turn out to be people with paper-thin consciences and hearts that are receptive to God. And it's like, okay, this all got turned. Like, what happened here? And so as you move through the story, what you're going to see, and here's how Jonah is the message, like, Jonah is exposed as a selfish, hypocritical, thoroughly flawed person. Jonah is the most faithless character in the whole story. He's the least responsive to God. He's the most hard-hearted. Is that how you remember the kid's story? So this is where we're trying to go. We're trying to strip it away from your children's version and give you the bigger picture and see, like, this is good. Like, this is good. And here's the other thing that we wanted to make sure we were all aware of. This is not just a story about an awful prophet. It's about you and me. That's the message. That the story speaks to us not just by exposing Jonah, but by exposing God's people, by exposing us. Our hard-heartedness, our hypocrisy, our resistance to God, our pride, our faithlessness. So if you walk away and like, Jonah's a wreck, man, you've missed it. Like, yes, he is. Do you see anything you recognize? That's what the story of Jonah is supposed to do. So this is not just a window into Jonah's heart. This is a mirror to help you see into yours. So for the next 4 weeks, we're going to cover a lot more ground. Now we're going to go one chapter at a time. So last week was giving you the big overview. So we're going to go one chapter at a time. There are 4 chapters in the book, and they get really interesting. So chapter 1 is Jonah running from God. We're going to be in that one today. Chapter 2 is Jonah crying out to God from the belly of the fish. Chapter 3 is Jonah finally obeying God. And chapter 4 is Jonah's irritation with God. Not happy with how God played that all out. And so it's kind of like a weird ending to the story, like Jonah ends griping, throwing a fit, doing this, and it's like the end. And you're like, oh, okay. That's the end. So, that's where we're going. We're covering those 4 chapters over the next 4 weeks. So we're going to be in chapter 1 today, and we're going to kind of walk all the way through that, Jonah running from God. So we left with Jonah booking his ticket to Tarshish in the complete opposite direction that God had asked him to go. So his goal was not just to avoid going to Nineveh. He definitely didn't want to do that. But we're told he wants to get away from God. So essentially, he's like, I'm done with the prophet gig. I'm not doing this anymore. Like, you're asking me to preach to the Ninevites, and I'm not doing that. So I'm out. I'm done. I'm booking my trip going the other way. And so he's on this ship, headed for Tarshish. He's running from God. And we read, then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. There are fun parts to the Hebrew language, and we can't cover all of this, but like the ship that threatened to break up, it almost animates it like, and the ship considered breaking up, is kind of, right? Like that's how the Hebrew reads more literally. Like, it's kind of like the ship is like, man, this is tough. I don't know if I can hold it together. Like, I may break up, right? Like, that's kind of how it reads in the Hebrew, and we can't unpack all of those, but there's lots of fun details in this story. So God sent this storm, and so really, that's an accurate translation, but if you would do the literal translation, it gets kind of interesting, because a more literal translation would be God hurled a great wind. And so then what you'll see is that idea gets repeated in the next few verses as the storm rages on. So God hurled the storm, right? And then the sailors are hurling things overboard. And then eventually they're going to hurl Jonah overboard, right? And so it kind of captures like the physical and emotional chaos of what's happening on the ship. I mean, they're just hurling stuff, right? Again, this is such a brilliantly told story. Like, you didn't get this in Sunday school. So all the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. So here's what you need to see right here. The sailors somehow knew, like, this is not a regular storm. So it's easy for us to look at something like this and be like, those ancient people, they always thought the gods were after them, right? And like, they're clueless and they're ignorant, and but here's what you need to know, like, these are sailors. Like, they know there are storms. They've been in storms. They prepare for storms. They have to navigate storms. Like, if you're a sailor, that's what you do, right? So they're not surprised that storms happen. They do happen, and they have to navigate those. So they wouldn't assume that every storm is a God trying to get them. They know storms. They know the signs of storms. They know how to navigate storms. But this one felt different. Kind of like it was hurled at them. Right? Maybe, and we don't know, maybe it was the sudden way it came up on them. Like, clear skies, and then suddenly, like, wow, what is coming at us? And then there's this raging storm. Like, what is this, and where did that come from? But somehow they knew this was no ordinary storm. So they're all praying to their gods. So this is a polytheistic culture, meaning there's all kinds of gods that they might pray to. And so if there's a storm that got hurled at them, they need to figure out which god hurled it, right? And so they're praying to as many gods as they can pray to, kind of like a shotgun approach to prayer. Hopefully, they're going to hit the right one. And then if they do that, they're going to try to figure out how to appease that God. That's what they're doing. And so things are getting so bad that they're throwing cargo overboard. Now think about this. Like, this is their livelihood. This is what they do. They move people and cargo, right, on ships. So you don't be like, storm, and start tossing over. Like, that is your last resort. This is your livelihood. So the fact that they're tossing stuff overboard, like that's not an option they're jumping to quickly. It tells you just how desperate this situation was. And that's where they find themselves. They are helplessly, desperately caught in this storm. So much so that like, you know what? We can toss the cargo because if we don't live, the cargo is not going to matter. So if something doesn't change, they know this ship is going to decide to break up and then we're going down. So meanwhile, Jonah had gone below deck where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Like strange, right? Like, really? You're sleeping through this? So remember last week we talked about one of the repetitions in the book of Jonah is this repetition of Jonah going down. Right? So he went down to Joppa, and then he went down into the ship, and now he's in the lower part of the ship, and now he's gone down into a deep sleep. Right? So he's slowly worked this downward progression of sin. He's sleeping during the storm, but you should see it as more than that. He is asleep spiritually. He has slowly descended into a state of spiritual slumber. This is a good one for us to look in the mirror. He's content on this ship that is hopefully taking him away from God. It's like his sin, his disobedience becomes like a sleep drug. A spiritual Ambien. He is spiritually asleep, completely checked out. And there's this growing disconnect between Jonah and God. This is an image of sin and what it does to us, how it affects us spiritually, how it impacts our hearts. So get back into the image. Like there is chaos everywhere, right? They're hurling stuff everywhere. And Jonah's oblivious. Somehow he's asleep through it all. And here's the thing. He's the reason for the storm. So everybody's shouting and praying and hurling things overboard, and Jonah's doing great. He's blissfully asleep in the lower part of the ship. So here's what we're supposed to notice, the contrast, right? The pagans are all fully engaged spiritually, crying out in prayer, but not the prophet Jonah. We're supposed to see this contrast. Here's the pagans, and they're spiritually alert. And here's God's prophet Jonah, and he's just out of it. He's clueless. So checked out and so dulled by his apathy that he doesn't notice or care what's happening around him. So here's what we all know, right? We know because we're reading this story. We all know that Jonah has brought this on everyone. Like his choices brought the storm. So I don't know if you've ever read that and kind of found that a little bit unsettling. Like, why would God put everyone on the ship through that? Just for Jonah. Like, they're all fighting for their lives, but it's not even about them. It's about Jonah. And it seems kind of like unreasonable, unfair, like, man, like leave the innocents out of it. But stop here, because we're supposed to see something. Because here's what we all know is true. This is how sin works. It's the nature of sin and its consequences. People sin, and others who had nothing to do with it get the storm. Right? Someone sins, they make choices, and then other people get the storm. Right? So parents make choices, and kids get the storm sometimes, don't they? Or the other way. Kids make choices, and parents get the storm. A leader makes a choice. A pastor makes a choice. A spouse makes a choice. A coworker makes a choice, and everyone gets the storm. This is how it works, isn't it? We could wish it didn't. We can act like it doesn't, which we do kind of act like it doesn't. See, our modern view of sin and morality, it's very individual-centered, right? You decide what's right for you. You find your moral compass. Don't you let anybody tell you, impose a moral code on you. You decide your moral code. It's your life, and you get to choose, right? Very individual approach. So your moral code might be different than mine. That's okay. We'll have separate moral codes. Remember the slogan, what happens in Vegas? One of the worst, right? I mean, it was catchy, right? But here's the sell. You come to Vegas, do what you want, be who you want. It's not leaving here. But here's the thing. You are. And what happens if what you did in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas? Oh, that's going to be a problem, isn't it? Right? And here's the thing. Not just for the person who made choices in Vegas, but for people around them. Here's the truth. You carry your sin with you. Even if your secret doesn't get out, it doesn't stay in Vegas. It comes with you. In Jonah chapter 1 with this storm, it exposes this it's really foolish, this foolish moral assumption that your sin, it's only about you. I mean, I'm just going to say this straight. That is really stupid and naive. Like, sin has consequences, not just for you, but for people around you. And it's so foolish and so reckless to act like or think like that my moral decisions only affect me, because we all know that's not how the world works. It's ridiculous to even follow that. And if you give even a little bit of thought, you're like, well, actually, that doesn't work. Our lives are interconnected. And so we all know, right, that if you sin, it doesn't just affect you. And here's what we all know, even though we say, hey, you make your choices and I'll make mine, there are moral boundaries. So guess what? Every time a sex scandal breaks in the news, like our culture that says, hey, you do what you think is right, all of a sudden we become pretty prudish and judgmental, don't we? Like, can you believe what they did? Like, it's almost weird, isn't it? Like, we're like, hey, go, do what you want to do. And then when they do, it's like, wow, what? Are you a moron? Like, why would you do that? Right? Like, it's weird how we switch gears. Like, what happened to you do you and do what makes you happy? So sometime in the past couple of years, I don't know exactly when, there was this viral news story about two business executives that were on a business trip, both of them married, not to each other. And so they were traveling somewhere. They went to a concert together. They were kind of standing and snuggling and dancing, and the kiss cam went around. And they showed up on the kiss cam, and both of them dove. And they're covering their faces, and it was so blatant and so strange that, and I don't know who the artist was, but the artist said, they're either really camera shy or they're having an affair. That's what the artist said. So, what do you think the world reaction was to that viral moment? Do you think everyone was excited for them? Right? Because, listen, they were true to themselves. Like, they didn't let their marriages get in the way of their happiness. Right? They didn't let their marriages keep them back from finding true love. Like, good for you both. So proud of you that you had the courage to do that. Do you think that was the reaction? But that's what our moral code says, right? Like, good for you. But here's how it actually happened. It was a huge scandal, right? And it took literally minutes online for them to be identified by name, and minutes for them to be identified where they worked. Like, and these people have marriages, they have children, they have spouses, they live in communities, and this thing blows up. And they're all over social media and news and, right? And so their spouses are humiliated in front of everyone. Their children are humiliated in front of everyone. Their marriages end. They lose their jobs. Their reputations are tarnished. Families and friends are all part of the debris field. People were not celebrating with him like, good for you that you found each other. People were shocked, disappointed. Like that these two people would carelessly and recklessly blow up everything and everyone in their world. Well, what happened to you do you? See, this is the reality of sin. We take this intellectual approach where we try to shape it and spin it as something else, but when it actually hits the world, this is what it looks like, isn't it? We make choices, and they don't affect us alone. Everyone gets that storm. People who have nothing to do with your choices get your storm. We've all seen it. This is what sin looks like in the real world. Jonah puts this truth right in front of us. Like, Jonah was the one running from God. Jonah's the one who has an issue, right? But everybody got that storm, didn't they? This is what's happening on the ship. Jonah's completely checked out. He's unaware of the storm. He's just happy to be on the ship, going away from God, away from Nineveh. And in the middle of the raging storm, the captain found Jonah sleeping below deck, and he says, "How can you sleep?" Which is a good question, right? "Get up and call on your God, and maybe he'll take notice of us that we will not perish." So the captain is surprised to find someone sleeping through the chaos and realizes, wait a second, there's maybe another God we could be calling on that could help us. And so he says, hey, get up and pray to your God, and maybe your God will notice us. Do you get it? Does Jonah's God notice them? Yes, he does. Right? This is so good. Right? Maybe your God will notice us. Oh yeah, he knows. And so the captain pleads with Jonah to pray to his God, and it appears Jonah did nothing. There's no sign of him praying, which shouldn't really surprise us, seeing that there's currently a strain in his relationship with God. Seeing as he's currently trying to run from God, that's not an ideal scenario to pray, right? In fact, if Jonah were to pray, what do you pray right now? Right? A stubbornly unrepentant Jonah crying out to God and saying, listen, I don't want to talk about me on this boat. I don't want to talk about my disobedience. I don't want to talk about me running, but I would love to talk to you about the storm. Right? Like it kind of like, I mean, there's an awkwardness to that, right? It'd be kind of like a teenager who makes a big stink and stomps out of the house and like, I just, and they stomp out and then 15 minutes later they're like, can I borrow the car? Right? And you're like, this might not be the best time to ask that. And my kids have never done that. They're pastors' kids. But I've heard about it. Right? So this is where Jonah's living. And again, let's just hold up the mirror. Some of us have been there too, right? Have you ever been in that place spiritually where you know your heart is not in the right place? Where you're choosing to walk in disobedience to God? But man, you could really use his help with something that's going on in your life right now. And it's an awkward place to be, right? To try to ignore the obvious issues in your life while trying to talk to God about your immediate crisis. So we want to talk to God, but we just want to, can we not look over there? And I would love to look over here at the storm, right? So I want to talk, but not about those things. Can we just leave those there? But these things, the storm, are the things I want to talk about. And there's an awkwardness to that, isn't there? When you're not where you should be spiritually, praying feels a little bit strange. Like you kind of have to deal with the stuff. Somehow, and we don't get any confirmation of the story, but I think Jonah had a suspicion that this storm might have had something to do with him. He's probably wondering, would God go that far to reach me? Is this about me? And just in case he wasn't sure, watch what happens. And then the crew cast lots to see which of them had offended the gods and caused the terrible storm. And when they did this, the lots identified Jonah as the culprit. Put yourself on the boat for a minute, right? They're desperate. They're running out of time. They're running out of options. The wind is howling. The waves are swelling. The water's crashing over the boat. The boat itself is creaking and groaning and thinking about breaking up. Rain is driving from above. And they've been pleading and praying. And they're like, the only thing left to do now is cast lots. Right? Okay, I guess that's your last option. But here's what I want you to understand. To them, this wasn't a random drawing. They were counting on a divine moment where God would highlight the person. And so they cast lots. Let's just call it drawing straws for something we can visualize, right? So they draw straws, and wouldn't you know it? Jonah draws the short straw. Are you kidding me? What are the chances? And you get the sense that Jonah probably at this point is feeling like it probably is pretty high. It doesn't even matter if I trade straws with somebody. I'm going to wind up with the shortest straw, no matter what I do. And so Jonah, probably hoping that somebody else is going to have that short straw, but I knew it. Right? There it is. I knew it was going to land on me. I just knew it. And so they start asking questions, demanding answers. Who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing? And what's with the storm? And here's what Jonah says. You ready? I'm a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. So again, we're supposed to notice, oh, that's rich, Jonah. What you just said there. He said, here's another way to translate it, I serve and fear the Lord, the God of heaven. Do you? Like, we know, as a reader, there's a massive disconnect between what he just professed there and what he's doing on that boat, right? Like, I don't even know how you say that with any conviction. Like, who are you and what do you do? Like, okay, I'm a Hebrew and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven who made the land and the sea, right? Like, because there's such a disconnect between what he just declared and what he's actually doing. And we're supposed to notice that. We're supposed to see like, wow, okay, Jonah, that was a weird answer coming from the guy on the run. So his statement is this: my God Jehovah made everything. He made the sea that is raging right now where we don't want to be, and the land where we would love to be right now. He made it all. And their response was one of amazement and horror. As they're shouting over the storm, right? The storm's still raging. And they're asked, what have you done? What have you done? And then the narrator whispers in our ear, they knew he was running away from the Lord because he's already told them that. So they know what's up. They know what he's done. The question is less, what have you done? And more like, are you nuts? Like, wait. You're telling us that your God made the sea and the land and you thought you were going to get away in a boat. Like, where did you think this was going to go? How did you think this was going to end? Did you really think this was going to work out, running from him in a boat when he made the land and the sea? Why would you do this? And so they figured out what's going on, why it feels like a storm has been hurled at them, right? The question is, now what? Like, what do you do now? And the sea was getting rougher and rougher, and so they asked him, what should we do to make the sea calm down for us? Notice the question. It's a great question, right? Not what should we do. Tell us what we should do to you to make the sea calm down. And Jonah says, throw me over the side of the boat, and this will all be done. So stop for a minute. Not turn the boat around and take me back to Joppa. Not, you know what? I need to get to Nineveh where God has called me to go. He says, just throw me overboard. So, here's what's happening, right? Jonah tried to run from God. That didn't work out. But what's a guaranteed way for Jonah to get out of going to Nineveh? Yeah. Like, hey, if you throw me overboard and I die, there's no way God's sending me to Nineveh. Right? And like, this is how set he is on defying what God has asked him to do. Like, kill me. I'm not going to Nineveh. So he says, throw me overboard. So then the sailors are like, well, no, I mean, we're not going to do that. Like, we're not just going to toss you over. And so they do everything they can to get back to land, and that didn't work out. And then I love it, like, finally, they're like, I mean, so are you going to jump or do we throw you? Right? Like, okay, I guess we're going to throw you in and see what happens because we're out of options. And so they go from, there's no way we're going to throw you, to like, let's toss him in and see what happens. And so the sailors picked Jonah up and threw him into the raging sea, and the storm stopped at once. That's weird, right? Have you seen the VeggieTales version? It's really funny, right? Like he hits the water and then sun comes out and and it's like the water turns glassy smooth and everybody's like, And like that's kind of the picture here, right? Like they throw him overboard and the storm that they had no answer for is all of a sudden like, I'm done. And they're all just sitting there in stunned silence, probably including Jonah, like, okay, that's weird. I wasn't sure that would actually happen. So Jonah hits the water. The storm stops like it's on a switch or something. And then, in a strange twist, right? Jonah's disobedience on that boat turns out to be a revival moment for these pagan sailors. Because what they just witnessed, a storm that they had no answer for, and then the immediate silence when they threw Jonah in, the sailors were awestruck by the Lord's great power, and they offered him a sacrifice and vowed to serve him. So one of the things you should see here is see off the boat. They probably didn't light a fire on the boat to do a sacrifice, right? So what you should be seeing is, so they got to land, and they're like, we're sacrificing to that God. We're worshiping that God. So, like for them, they watched everything that just happened, and they're like, that is the Lord of the sea and the land, and we are worshiping that God. And once again, you're supposed to notice. Here's the pagan sailors like, we worship that God. And here's Jonah, kill me. Just kill me. So I don't have to do this. You're supposed to see the contrast, like, wow, okay, so that's not who I thought the pagan sailors would be, and that's not who I thought the prophet would be. I mean, Jonah claims to fear and worship God, but in a weird twist, it's the pagan sailors who actually do. You catching it? So let me finish with this. So this whole idea of the storm being hurled, like this feels very much like our Old Testament view of God, like, there's the God throwing lightning bolts and storms at people, right? Like the God of judgment, the vindictive God, the God of punishment. Like, if you won't obey me, I'll throw storms at you. But what's actually happening in Jonah chapter 1? Is it God punishing Jonah? It's not. What is God doing? Ready? He's pursuing Jonah. It's a very different thing, isn't it? He's not punishing Jonah like, you run, I'll throw storms at you. He's pursuing Jonah. You run, but I'm going to find my way back to you, and I'm going to get you where I want you to go. He's pursuing Jonah in his spiritual slumber. This is pursuit. And so we read the oh so familiar line, and we'll get into this next week. And now the Lord had arranged a great fish to swallow Jonah. So here's your teaser for next week. The big fish that swallows Jonah is the vehicle of God's mercy. Otherwise, Jonah accomplishes what he set out to do, right? Throw me overboard, let me die, and I'll be done. And God says, they're going to throw you overboard, but I'm not going to let you die. I'm sending my mercy in an unusual form, in the form of a big fish. And so, this is your teaser for next week. God has pursued Jonah. God will save Jonah through this fish. And God will send him back onto dry land through the fish. That's next week. Is this what you remember as your children's story? It's a little different, right? But it's good. It's a good mirror for us. It's good for us to see some of these things. It's good for us to see, right? You sin, lots of people get the storm. You can say it's unfair, unreasonable, whatever, but you only have to look around at your own family and be like, oh yeah, I've seen that before, right? Like, this is how it works. Somebody does something and everybody gets the storm. And we're supposed to see it. We're supposed to see the hypocrisy of Jonah. We're supposed to see, like, we have, here's our church people, like, these are the good church people, and there's those godless people, and yet, weirdly, sometimes the godless people outside the church sometimes act more godly than the people in the church. That's the stuff we're supposed to see in the story of Jonah. But God pursues. Not just them out there. Us in here. God pursues. God saves. And even when we've made a mess of it all, He'll send us out again. That is the story of Jonah. I'm going to pray for us, and I'm going to invite us to stand and sing together. Lord, thank you.